Hi everyone, welcome back to part 3 of History Grade 7, Term 4. So in this video we're going to be discussing the British immigration and also the fur trekkers, the Great Trek and the inboekselings. Now the British basically took over the Cape in 1806. Prior to that, there were about 25,000 European settlers who were mainly Dutch-speaking people that had come in from the Netherlands, and they were in constant conflict with the Xhosa people, and they had already fought 5 frontier wars. So the British had learned about this, and they wanted their own people to come into settle into Cape, and also to build up a resistance and to be able to defend the eastern frontier against the Xhosa people. So what they did was that after the Napoleonic Wars, Britain had experienced serious unemployment rates. So the government had decided that they were going to pay about 4,000 unemployed British people and their families to relocate to become the Cape settlers. And there were many ships like the one on the left right hand corner at the bottom that had carried these settlers, and they came, and you'll see how they settled here on the left hand side at the bottom, and they arrived at Alonga Bay and Table Bay in 1820, and each family was given a small piece of land where they could grow crops. So Alonga Bay is here at the bottom near Port Elizabeth on the eastern side of Africa, and Table Bay is here at the top on the top map. So now when these people came in, they were basically in Britain people that were from the city, and they didn't know anything about farming, and nor did they know anything about southern Africa. They were given land in Zuurveld. Now you must know that Zuurveld was a farm, and in 1822 the settlers had left their farms, because imagine coming into a whole new place that you know nothing about, and you know nothing about farming, and the government tells you, here, go, here's some land, farm. Now if you don't have any farming experience, do you think your farm's going to be successful? No, it's not. So these settlers had left their farms, and previously in Britain there used to be business people, and business-minded people, and they used to have shops. So they left their farms, and then in the eastern frontier they started to set up trading shops, and they became business people, where they started buying and selling goods, and they started trading in ivory and animal skins with the Xhosa people across the border. Now, the remaining farmers, they started planting maize, rye, and barley. And they also started farming with merino sheep. Now, merino sheep was quite popular in Britain, and the climate in South Africa was perfect for sheep farming. So, and there was a great demand of wool for their textile factories in Britain. So this became a very profitable farming business for them. So in 1846, the wool industry was a great successful export business in the Cape, and it flourished. Now during the late 1800s, late 18th century, the British people had decided that, they don't want slavery. They don't want to be part of the slave system anymore. So in 1836, they had moved to abolish slavery. So what had happened was, in 1807, they stopped slavery in most of their British colonies. Now, it didn't just end when you say, oh, now I'm stopping slavery. It was a process. So the first process was that they were no longer allowed to bring in new slaves, nor were they allowed to um, uh, um, bring in or take on new slaves means the same thing, but you could not buy any slaves anymore. But the slaves that were within the colony, still existed and they could be bought and sold, but you couldn't bring new people in. So now you're going to ask yourself, and this is a great test question, is why were the slaves freed? So there were three reasons. The first reason was humanitarian reasons. So the British felt that it was wrong, morally wrong, to own another human being. All humans should be free. And they believed slavery was cruel and it was against the will of God. So they put pressure on the British government to end slavery. So you can see from the source, they said that no man should be treated like cattle. Like how you buy and sell cattle, slaves should not be bought and sold in that manner. Now, the second reason was economic reasons. So they believed that for them to be successful and to become richer, they needed to pay their workforce. So they believed that if you paid people to work for you, then they would be more motivated to work and they would work harder. And if they were free, they would definitely work harder. Now, you must know slaves, one of their rebellions was to not work or to work slowly or to pretend to be sick. But if you were going to get paid, then you had to work. Then the other reason was that if you earned a salary, then you will be able to buy products, and this would help to improve the economy and help the economy grow. The other reason was slave rebellion. So the slaves within themselves helped gain their freedom. So there were two slave revolts in the Cape Colony in 1808, and the other one was in 1825. Now these revolts had made all people in the British colonies afraid, because the word of the revolt spread and the slave owners became frightened. So they decided to free their slaves and start paying them wages. However, let's look at this. Before I explain something, let's look at this case study with the wine farmers that supported an end to slavery. So what had happened was the grape and wine farmers in Stellenbosch and Drakenstein in the Cape, they used to use slave labor in the 1700s. And the British used to buy the wine from the people, the British people in the Cape. Now, this wine industry had become very successful and it boosted the economy in the Cape Colony. But then in 1826, the Britain started buying wine cheaply in France. And also, you must know that when you are using slaves and stuff, the other countries hear about this and then they decided that it was wrong. So they started sanctioning the Cape. And with these sanctions, because they weren't buying the Cape and they were obtaining it free more cheaply in France, the Cape farmers saw that their wine was not selling and it was no longer needed. So they decided to free their slaves and um, uh, to use them as to pay them cheap wages. So unlike the slaves, the workers could get fired if they didn't work. So then, because now you had the belief that if I don't work, I'm going to get fired, then they started working nicely as well. And the sanctions, obviously, it wasn't like spoken sanctions, but it was like, it's morally wrong. I'm not going to do that. So that's how the British government put pressure on the people in the Cape to stop slavery. So in 1833, they abolished slavery in all British colonies, and now this meant that um, all slave owners had to um, get rid of their slaves, but they gave them a period of 4 years in which to do it. So the first day of the real freedom came was on the 1st December 1838, and this was where all slaves were now free and they could demand wages. And now slave owners were paid out by the British government for their losses of their slave property. However, the slaves were not compensated for all those years that they had worked without pay. So what had happened was that because now they had lost out on all the money that they were supposed to receive, they had no choice but to carry on doing the hard work that they were doing and accept the low wages were that they received. So although the laws had changed, the treatment of the way they treated their slaves and their new workers were the same. So the Boers moved into the interior, and it was called the Great Trek. They moved because they didn't like the way they were angry with the British government because they felt that the government was against them. So these are the reasons why they moved into the interior. They felt that the government did not protect them. They felt that they were losing their Dutch language, and English was becoming more prominent, and there was great conflict with the Xhosa over the land. So the solution was to move into the interior, away from the British, where they could make their own rules and live the lives that they wanted. So in 1846, thousands of fur trekkers moved on. It was called the Great Trek. They moved into the interior of Africa, and they took all their with their ox wagons. They packed up their ox wagons, their servants, their slaves, and they headed north in search for new homes. And this became known as the Great Trek, and they were called the fur trekkers, and they met up with many indigenous peoples as they were moving, and because they had guns and horses, they overpowered the indigenous people and took over their land from their local people, and the local people's land became disrupted. So these trekkers were called Boers, and they moved further and further away from the British, and they led self-sufficient lives with no authority, and the Dutch had no authority over them, and they were unable to control them. So when the British arrived, um, they this led to a lot of change because of their culture and also because of the language change. So we discussed why they left their Cape Colony, because they wanted to be free, and these Boers were treated their Khoikhoi, the servants, quite badly. And in 1828, the British passed a law called the Ordinance 50, which allowed all Khoikhoi to move around freely around the Cape Colony. And in 1838, the colonist slaves were freed. Now, the Sixth Frontier War was led by Makoba. Now, this was one of the reasons why they also left the east to leave to the eastern frontier. And in 1836, the British governor had returned all the land that was near the Kishmisha River and the Kei rivers to the Xhosa to make peace with the Xhosa chiefs. Now, the Boers did not like this because they wanted the Kishmisha land. So this was one of the reasons why they also moved. Now this is a picture showing the movement on the map, and the picture on the right shows you how they moved with their ox wagon. Right. So the inbookselings, you can see the picture on the right at the top how they looked. So the inbookselings were basically little children that were captured by the fur trekkers. Now you must know, when the fur trekkers moved into the land, they initially wanted people to work for them, but the local people weren't sufficient enough, so the fur trekkers raided nearby communities and they stole the children, and they justified stealing the children by saying, oh no, these children are orphans, that's why we can take them, and they referred to these children as black ivory. So they stole these children and said that no, now they're orphans. So then when the British government heard about this, they told them, well, now you have to register these children under the magistrate district court, and if you caught them, and they must work for you until they're 25 years old. So these children were called inboekselings, and they had different jobs such as milking cows, herding sheep and cattle and ox wagon, and building dams and houses. And in exchange, they were given food, clothes, and a place to sleep. Right. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. And I'm going to do one more video. Bye, everyone.